that. A lot of times, when I was a kid, my grandmother, I would play sick sometimes, so I wouldn't have to go to school when I was a kid. My grandma would say, "Hey, you can go with the shaya seed. There's nothing wrong with you. You're going to school." And I said, "No, no, I'm so sick. I can hardly. My stomach is so sore." She says, "Just sit there for a little while, and before you know it, you will be sick." And I would say, "Well, I am sick. I'm really sick." And the next thing you know, I'm sick.
It's a little bit like medical student syndrome, where they study an illness and half the class decides they have it.
Yeah, exactly. That's how powerful that, when you're talking about the energy of sickness and negativity, is very real. And it's science is starting to see that. Like, to be able to take more information on this, I went and bought a book on brains and a brain, how to look after your brain and that. And it mentions that in there, that they've discovered now that there's energy and so forth. And when you, even a simple little thing like throwing your used junk away, if you throw your used junk away, think of it as making room for new things to come into your life, because that's literally what happens. And some of the stuff that we take up, it's good to have the language, but it's also good to understand exactly what's happening in your life as a result of knowing another language. You learn another way of communicating, and you learn another way of understanding the energy around you and so forth. So I tried to do it that way, because that's how I learned. That's how I acquired my Ojibwe language. I acquired that. It didn't. There was no effort in me learning and having that language. I was taught by actuality, and I learned how to be able to have how would I say that, potentiality in my life. I've been very fortunate to be able to have potentiality in my life. I guess potentiality in the way of being home when opportunity knocks. Basically, that's what I can say that's what potentiality is. Being ready to answer the door when there's a knock on the door. And to me, that's what preparing myself through education and through elders and through ceremony. That's what that means. Literally, you are what you think, and you are what you focus, and so forth. So that I tried to have a good life, and I do experience a good life as a result of working on potentiality and so forth. And it's a very real thing when you get to understand the language. When you know the language, you will know intuitively. You will know certain things that you don't learn in English, and so forth. That's so. If Susan, do you think you'd like to try to read the rest of them? Start off with Ndaakos.
Ndaakos. Nmaanaajayaa.
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 Ndewkweh.
Ndewkweh.
Yeah.
Ngiiwshkweh.
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 Yeah, you're really doing good.
Nniinimis. Ndayekos. Ngiikach. Unless I'm old and not cold.
I'm both.
Ndabwes,
Mhm.
Ngiikibingosh,
Mhm.
Nbakade.
Yes, that's good. There's a word there I'd like to bring up is Ndabwes. If you slow down your word Ndewkweh, you would be saying Ndewkweh. If you say Ndewkweh, you would be saying I'm telling the truth.
Okay.
Yeah, but this one here is Ndabwes. Ndabwes is I am sweating, I am warm.
Mhm. This weekend, everybody was Ndabwes.
Yeah, it was kind of warm, eh?
Could you just repeat again what is I'm telling the truth?
Right?
Could you repeat how do we say I am telling the truth?
And Ndewkweh.
Or that way?
Ndewkweh, yeah.
Ndewkweh.
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 Yeah. This one has an A there, so it's Ndabwes. That's the difference. The other one would be Ndewkweh would have an E instead of an A.
So if I say Ndabwes and Ndayekos.
Ngiikibingosh
Huh?
or Ndayekos.
Ndayekos.
Yeah, Ndabwes.
Ndabwes.
Ndayekos. Yeah, I'm telling you the truth when I say I'm just tired. Ngiikach, I am cold. Ngiikibingosh. Ngiikibingosh. That's what happens to me when I drive for about 5 hours. I get really sleepy. I have to stop for 5 minutes and sleep, and then I'm okay again for another 5 hours.
That's a good strategy. It is a good strategy to stop and have a sleep and continue.
Yeah.
If you're driving, yeah.
It is, yeah. A lot of times, if I see a good place where I can stop on the side of the road, I will get up and I will put a carpet down and I will do maybe 50 push-ups or so. And I put push-ups.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll get back to my car and I'll be wide awake. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So because I'm the kind of person that will fall asleep without knowing. You know, all of a sudden, I'm gone. So I have to be careful. The difference between I am sick and Ndaakos is you are very aware of what's going on. Your sore stomach or your headache, and you're pretty well know that you're not feeling very well in some part of your body. Nmaanaajayaa is kind of like you're feeling kind of nauseous. Your stomach's not feeling right, or your head's not feeling right, and you're feeling kind of nauseous. So that's why you say Nmaanaajayaa. I'm uncomfortable. I'm not very comfortable right now. I'm feeling faint and so forth. And Ngiiwshkweh, you know, it's you're. I've also started this because if we're going to be doing this for a while, and if you're going to be learning the language, you are going to know how to read some of the words. So I have I use an H at the end of the sentence, Ndewkweh, to be able to illustrate that you don't say Ndewkweh, you say Ndewkweh. And same thing with Ngiiwshkweh. It's to kind of take away the E and more or less have it as a EH. And it shortens and it changes the form. A lot of people, they don't do that. So when you read something, you'd say Ndayekos, or no, where's that word? Ngiiwshkweh, Ngiiwshkweh,
Ngiiwshkweh.
Ngiiwshkweh. Is that,
Ngiiwshkweh.
yeah, if
Ngiiwshkweh.
the H is there, so you say Ngiiwshkweh.
Ngiiwshkweh.
Mhm. It's the same thing like
Ngiiwshkweh.
G-O-H. Instead of saying go, you'd say go. The G-O-H, go. Ngoja, Ngija, Ngoja. Any other questions or comments? I try to leave room for you to have your comments or questions or whatever. I've been in many classes where the elder got upset because he was interrupted. So I just want to let you know that you can interrupt me all you want. A lot of times, some of the places where I've been, it has a lot to do with the system of teaching and the system of being right. I've always left it open so that if you have something that you don't agree with, you're free to say that, and you're free to be able to bring up your concern and so forth. Because I've been in classrooms where you weren't allowed to intervene or interrupt or anything like that. It was almost like you were there was a hidden rule or something where you could complain or whatever. And I've always my most interesting classes lots of times have been where somebody started to argue, and I said, okay, well, here we go, you know. And it actually makes everybody comfortable when you're able to voice your concern about something. And I've been right quite a few times, and I've been wrong a lot of times too. That some of my students, they get so good that they're able to say, hey, you know, how come you told me this before, now you're telling us this? And I've purposely done something to wake them up, and then they'll catch it. And sure enough, that shows you that they're really trying hard. Try to teach the words in a way that you would be able to add to your language, add to the words that you know, because you know a certain thing here, and then so forth. Somewhere down the line, I'm going to be teaching you another part of that word, where you can attach that word to the meaning that is in front of you. That is the proper way that I acquired a language. I learned how to build up on my own language when I was a little guy. And I wasn't afraid to try any word that came out, like the word for mouse is wabaganuji. And so I said it the way it sounded like to me. I'd say bubuji, bubuji. And my grandmother would say, oh yeah, mm-hmm. And she wouldn't say I was wrong or nothing. She would just say, oh, she said, I understand what you're saying. Bubuji. She would know what I was saying, we're trying to say. And I see that mouse again the next time, and I'd say bubuji again, but the third time I would say wabaganuji. And my grandmother would never tell me it's wabaganuji. She would just say, oh. But in my own way, of the way I'm learning the language and acquiring the language, I would begin to understand how to correct myself. And I've always known then, because I learned English the same way. I learned how to add on to the words that I'm learning, start up my own words, and I learned languages very fast. I started to even learn Finn. I learned Finn the same exact way, and the first word I learned was boika, and the next word I learned was Nmaanaajayaa. And so it didn't take me long before somebody was yelling at me, boika, Nmaanaajayaa, and I would understand what they were saying. Go home, boy, and the attaching meaning to words and so forth was very fast. So I tried to teach the language in that way, so that you are acquiring the understanding of how to use that language. And a lot of times go ahead.
So with this group of words, let me see now. Ndewkweh, the headache, is there something about ache or pain in that word that if it was a backache, instead part of that word would show up along with the word for back?
Yeah. Ndewkweh, you said Ndewkweh. Ndewkweh be your back is sore. Or you'd say Ndewkweh, and you would ask somebody if their back is sore, and so forth. And it seems like the word, the K in there always seems to come up after. Ndewkweh, Ndewkweh, and that word is K is there again. So when you learn enough words, so that after a while you're starting to build your own. You're starting to build your own sentences. You're starting to build your own pictures. After a while, instead of forming pictures with your words, the next thing you know, the picture comes up, and then you describe the picture. That is why you acquire a language. And it hadn't been done until I started to teach, because I said, well, I don't want to teach a language for 10 years and then the person still doesn't know how to speak the language. I want to be able to speak the language so that the person can use the language on their own when they need to use it sometime down the road. As we speak now, the language teachers have been going to get training in Thunder Bay for the last, since 1986. There's been about 120 or 130 students every year that go to Thunder Bay to learn how to teach the language. I was in the second bunch that went out to do that. I was teaching high school kids. I was teaching Canadore kids, Cambrian kids, I mean. I was teaching the language to them. I developed the language program the way I knew the language program at that time. And the methodology that I used at that time, drilling and so forth, it never worked for me. Not one of those kids that was in my class speaks the language. So I didn't want to waste people's time anymore. So I said, well, I gotta learn how I learned this language. I have to learn the science of acquiring a language. And so that's what I tried to do. And that's why we, even today, I guess I must think I teach so well that I even put a disclaimer. You talk about a headache, you're going to get one. But that is actually part of the thing. When the thing that you got to disclaim is when there's an N in front of the word. Ndaakos, Nmaanaajayaa, Ndewkweh, Ngiiwshkweh, Nniinimis, Ndayekos, Ngiikach, Ndabwes, Ngiikibingosh, Nbakade. Every one of those words has an N in front of it. That means there's ownership to yourself to that word. There's ownership in that word all the way down the line. So that means that you're owning what you're saying. And so, through understanding energy and so forth, I say, well, I got to be careful that I don't literally make people sick when we're talking about the negative stuff on here. Because I've noticed that in some other languages too, some of the East Indian words, they sometimes have something like that. So I think that's if you prepare yourself to not teach people how to get sick somehow by accident. When you prepare yourself for that, you're also preparing the person. It's okay to learn this word. Once your brain receives the permission to use the word, you will be able to use that word without fear. So it kind of works both ways. I know when I learned both Finn and English, and well, English was the only one where I was corrected all the time. I was not corrected in Finn. I was never corrected in Ojibwe, but I was always corrected in English. I didn't actually make a mistake in my life until I went to grade 1, and I tried to write out a word, print out a word, and the teacher put an X beside my work. That is the first time I ever made a mistake. I was about 7 years old, and oh my God, I made a mistake. I didn't know what a mistake was before that. And I've been making mistakes ever since. So. Any questions or comments?
How to say I have a cough and coffee? Cough?
Yes, of course.
Oh yeah. The reason you're coughing, you could talk about the reason you're coughing. Ngiikach. You could say Ngiikach. Ngiikach.
Ngiikach.
You caught a cold.
Yeah, Ngiikach.
Ngiikach. You caught a cold, so that's why you're coughing.
Ngiikach.
Yeah. Dusosadam is I'm coughing. Dusosadam. Dusosadam.
Dusosadam.
Dusosadam. Yeah. Ndososdum. Dusosadam. Is that Sarah?
No, that's not me. I don't know what the noise came from.
Oh, okay. So that's a good question. Yeah. Ngiikach is I caught a cold. Ngiikach. It means you caught a chill. You caught a chill. It almost says Ngiikaching. It almost says that, but your Ngiikach is you have a CHT at the end. Ngiikach. CATCH. Ngiikach. And to say I am cold, you say Ngiikach. And then when you're saying Ngiikach, you're saying I caught the chill. Here with the word I am cold, you're saying Ngiikach. It doesn't mean you had a cold. It means you're cold. So that's kind of like a play on words here. So if I were to ask you, Anipish Kitkajit, where did you catch your chill? I would be able to ask you, Anipish Kitkajit. A lot of times when you don't know something, when you're not familiar with something to the fullest extent, you could also say Nniinimis, meaning that you don't know where to step or you don't know where to move. You would because you haven't learned. You could say Nniinimis also. If I'm having trouble riding a bicycle, I would be able to say Nniinimis. Because they changed the bicycle so darn much since I rode a bicycle, I'd have a hard time riding. The only I had the top of the line bike when I was a kid. I had a 3-speed bicycle, and the next time I had that for about 3 years until I started high school or whatever. And, the next time I jumped on a bicycle, it was a 21-speed bicycle, and I almost killed myself because I wasn't used to that many gears. Think about a person that thinks logically. I jumped on a 21-speed bicycle, and I went downhill, and I was trying to gear shift down, because with a car you can shift down to slow yourself down going down a hill. So I tried to do that with a bicycle. It does not work. Surprise of my life. But that's again, that's what the language teaches you. A language teaches you logic. The language of Ojibwe teaches you how to use logic to be able to come up with some conclusions in your life. And those are some of the things that I'll be teaching if we get to that part in another month or so. How you are able to understand some of those systems.
Did you have to make up new vocabulary to do a COVID self-test of how do you feel today?
Pretty well. Basically, yes. What most of the people that are around nowadays, you learn English so well that you can use the English in Ojibwe. We don't say most people don't say Misanateshjigan. Most people will say TV. TV. They were saying we're going to done TV. They were saying I'm going to go watch the TV. The old people, myself, we will say no, I'm going to watch TV. A lot of times you have Ngiidev non COVID. They were saying Ngiidev non COVID. We would say Ojibwe would say Ngiidev Nagurmanda Kakanopnew, because it is a form of lung sickness. I would mention that Ngiidev non-manda Kakanopnew. I would still be able to speak the whole words. Like there's a lot of translators and interpreters that speak in courts and in big government meetings, and they still don't know how to use a lot of the language. So they say, if for treaty, they say, "Misamanda treaty is bigadek manpi, mimanda treaty manpi ekadong." Me, I would be able to say, because I always known that as a translator, you have to translate all of the words to the language you're supposed to be using. So I would say, Nbakade. I would know how to say the whole thing in my language. Because people have gotten used to the word treaty, and they don't know the old words, they would say, the treaty is bigod. This is what the treaty says. And I would say, if I were to say, talk about Robinson here and treating, I'd say, in Ojibwe, and most translators, they have to use English. They have to use Ngiiwshkweh, what we call Ngiiwshkweh, because they don't know how to say the whole meaning.
The ones who commentate at the hockey games.
Is that?
The ones who commentate at the hockey games. You should see scores.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It would sound kind of funny if you'd say, Ngiikiibingosh. You already scored twice by the time you finish. But being raised and being speaking my language every night after school, I learned English very well, and I learned Ojibwe very well, but I also learned Finn on top of that. And the three languages kind of balance each other after a while. And along with the language, you also learned a whole new system of thought. In my First Nation, when I was a little guy, there was a lot of body shame in my First Nation, because there was a lot of sickness on my First Nation, and drinking and everything. So there was body shame on my reserve. When I was playing with the Finn kids, it was a different story. There was no recognition of body shame. We'd all go take off all our clothes and go swimming and dive in the water, and there'd be girls and boys all together and everything. We didn't know what embarrassment was. In Finn, there's no word for it, and so forth. In Ojibwe, it's a totally different story. So you have to think pretty fast, because I learned Finn pretty good, and I also knew English fairly well, and so most of the kids, the Ojibwe kids, they still spoke Ojibwe. The ones that didn't go to residential school, they still spoke Ojibwe. But you would be speaking into a totally different thing. You would be using shame words in Ojibwe to be able to not do what other people were doing. And it was a pretty serious thing with me, because I learned very early in my life how to look after myself, so that I would be able to stay healthy in my mind, and so forth. Because when you learn Finn language, well, you learn a different form of living, And I think that's like that with every language. I think it's like that. I know that in Sweden, again, it's a different language, but the same relationship with body is very visible. Right? Wherever there's no body shame, there is also no rape. Very low form of rape or anything like that. Where there's a lot of body shame, there's a lot of rape. So there must be a system why that happens with people and why they develop like that. So I don't know how I got in that subject, but anyway, I think somebody asked me something or other. Okay, pretty soon it's going to be finished. So before we leave, say to yourself, when you are familiar with your language, before you leave the area, always read your list there and saying, I am well, I am not sick, and I am not feeling uncomfortable, I don't have a headache, I am not dizzy, I am not clumsy, I am not tired. And put yourself through that. so that you're able to get yourself out of that role. Because you're literally putting yourself in a role when you're learning a language and you're learning words, you're literally putting yourself into that role. The brain doesn't know what's real and what's not. So that's why in a lot of, like I teach, I also teach wellness. Like I was teaching wellness in what do you call Canadore in North Bay. I was teaching healing and wellness to native people, and I had to learn that in some of the classrooms you have to de-roll the people, because if you're teaching a language to believability, you have to be able to debrief everybody and so forth. How many of you understand what I'm saying about that? Do you believe what I'm saying? Okay.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Because it's true, the brain has a lot of power, right? So
Yeah, that's good. Now, if there's no more, you can start to debrief yourself, I guess. And learn to say those words, and learn to look at these words and say that that's not what you're feeling right now. Make yourself well. Anything else?
I was going to tell you a funny story about when you were talking about the power of women and wearing skirts. I learned that early when I came to Laurentian, because I taught in midwifery, and we brought in a lot of Indigenous teachers to help us to learn about how to provide good care. And so one of the first things I learned was you better wear a skirt when you're doing something important. So I was invited to go up to Moose Factory to help with some breastfeeding teaching. And I thought, I'm not even going to pack a pair of pants. I know that's an important topic, and so I'm going to wear a skirt the whole time. Well, little did I know that up in Moose Factory, they don't wear skirts. They wear pants because there's too many black flies and mosquitoes.
My grandma, she wore a skirt all the time. And even when she was like, she looked after me, and my grandpa was on a trap line. And when we went to the cabin, she stayed at the cabin, looked after me. And my grandpa's the one that went checking his traps and everything like that. And she'd have to go in the bush and cut wood, and she'd have to go fishing. So all of those things that she did, she wore a skirt. And I didn't know it at the time, though, or anything, but I didn't really understand the teachings, because I just thought, well, that's how everybody dresses and so forth. And I just thought, well, she's my grandma, that's why she wears a skirt and so forth. And but at that time, I didn't know. I didn't know that people, the women didn't wear well, my grandmother anyway, didn't wear anything underneath that skirt. She wore the skirt, and it was a heavy skirt. And she wore the skirt so that the energy from the earth would come into that skirt underneath, come right up like that. That's why it was made like this. So the energy would come up like that. I didn't know any of that until I got older, and I'm saying, geez, I asked my grandma as I getting older, I said, when you run around out there on the ice like that, and, in Ojibwe, you're going to freeze your bum off. And she said, oh, no. It's very warm in there. But that was my understanding. Like she was teaching me later on why she wore a skirt when I was around. And she says, you know how you learn how to walk? And I says, yeah, I think I remember. I says, I was hanging on to the bed, and I was hanging on to the chair. And she says, no, she says, you were sitting in the middle of the floor. And she says, well, one day, she says, as I was walking by, you reached out. And she says, you missed what you were reaching for. She says, so I stopped and I walked back a little bit, and then you grabbed it, she says. And you grabbed my skirt. And then she says, then you grabbed your other hand. And she says, then you pulled yourself up. She says, the first time you ever stood up, you ever stood up on the floor, you're standing there hanging on. And she says, for the rest of your life, you will remember it's a woman that gives you balance. She said, that's why you go through that. She said, if you learn, if your mother wore a skirt, if you grabbed onto that and you hang on to that, she says, you will have that in your head and you will carry that with you all your life. That a woman, you'll always look towards a woman to have balance in your life. And she was right. Like, I look towards my wife for balance. Sometimes I'm not sure about something or other, so I ask her, well, what about this? What do you think about that? And she will tell me, and then I'll have that balance, and so forth. It's a different thing. Like, when you have that, when you're looking for that help, you're also told never to abuse a woman. So you never do that. You put that woman to you treat that woman as if that's, to me, I treat a woman like she's my grandmother, because that's how I learned that balance. That's how I learned that caring. And it makes you feel very special inside because someone very strong is giving you that balance. In English, I have a whole different understanding because you run into a different thought, a different way of looking at things. Yeah, so that's pretty good. I'm glad you gave us that story about that skirt. That's a good story.